All right. So there has been some disagreement in the Trump cabinet about these tariffs. Elon, being somebody who has to import a lot overseas, has been going back and forth with Peter Navarro. So Insurrection Barbie here, she has a pretty big account. She tweeted out, here is Peter Navarro explaining the tariffs, and contrary to the paid fake expert class that is usually on corporate media, Peter Navarro has a PhD in economics from Harvard. He's also not going to lie to you about what is happening to a globalist agenda. Notice how he uses specific details instead of blank statements like chaos agent and destroying America. So let's hear what she was so impressed by.
The U.S. have chronic and sustained trade deficits.
No, there's a
according to economic theory, they should not. So what the trade deficit does for any given country, it's the sum of all cheating. It's the sum of all unfair trade practices. And in a national emergency where the trade deficit itself is the national emergency and security threat because it takes our factories, our jobs, and transfers wealth abroad, the reciprocal tariff is that which reduce.
Okay. All right. So what he's talking about, like, for example, Vietnam has offered 0% tariffs to the United States. And they're saying that's not enough because what they did, and it seems like this is true, this is not speculation. They literally took the trade deficit that we have with other countries, divided it by 2, and called that a tariff. Now, what they're saying now to explain that is, well, there's all kinds of things they're doing, like rerouting goods through their country to get around tariffs, and we're hitting them for that, and we're hitting them on their value-added tax and their currency manipulation. We're just saying there's no way that you would have this deficit unless you were doing things like that, and we're not going to get into the weeds of figuring out what you're doing, but clearly you're doing something if you're not buying our goods. Now, I'm probably going to mispronounce this, but the country of Lesotho, that's how it's spelled, but I don't think that's how it's said. That's a prime example of the flaw in that logic, because it's a very poor diamond exporting country.
Right.
So that's why you would get a trade deficit like that without any currency manipulation or VAT,
Right,
because they're exporting diamonds, but it's a poor country, so they're not buying our consumer goods. That's the reason for that. Now, what he's saying, I'm sure, is true to some extent with certain countries, but they just did this with a sledgehammer instead of with a scalpel, even if you agree with the basic premise. Now, somebody who does not agree with the basic premise is Elon Musk. So he responded to this. A PhD in econ from Harvard is a bad thing, not a good thing. Results in the ego/brains are greater than one problem. All right. So the next thing he did, he actually took down. I had to find a screenshot of it.
I mean, he's smarter than me if he understands what he just said. I don't even get what that means. Ego divided by brains is greater than 1.
Yeah, well, he's saying it winds up being on the ego brain side rather than the cogent point side. So Simon Manning here says, Navarro is 100 correct, PhD or no PhD. No PhD here, just been obsessed with trade for quite a while. And Elon responded, he ain't built shit. Now, he did take that down. That is gone, but I was able to find it. So now, not the whole Musk family now is getting in on the act. You might be wondering why the board of directors has not tried to get rid of Elon, given that his brand is probably permanently tainted with the core customer base of Tesla going forward, even after he leaves Doge. The board is stacked with family members, friends, sycophants, so they're not going to vote him off. That's exactly why he stacked it that way. So his brother, Kimball Musk, is on the board and obviously taking the same side. Who would have thought that Trump was actually the most high-tax American president in generations? Through his tariff strategy, Trump has implemented a structural permanent tax on the American consumer. Even if he is successful in bringing jobs onshore through the tariff tax, prices will remain high, and the tax on consumption will remain the form of higher prices because we are simply not as good at making all things. A tax on consumption also means less consumption, which means less jobs, which in turn leads to less consumption, and then even less jobs. America has incredible strengths. We should play to those strengths and not be forced to play to our weaknesses. Same with the rest of the world. So now, with a certain audience, everything goes back to where you were during COVID. So Cernovich responds, "You were a COVIDian, even in late 2020, when it was known who COVID harmed. This was known by April 2020. Start to see the world on a longer timeline. Panicking isn't masculine or honorable." Okay.
Didn't
All
Trump
right.
call them the panicans or something in a tweet?
Did he call them that?
Yeah, that was like a trending term
the
for a
guy who
while.
funded and distributed the vaccine? That Trump?
No, I'm talking
That
about
one?
no, not the COVID people. I'm talking about the people who reacted badly to the market crash. He called them panicans
Oh,
in a Truth Social post.
I see. So okay, of course, that is very relevant to a conversation about trade because everything is relevant to that one issue for some folks. So Musk beamed in a lecture to an Italian conference where he, without directly going at Navarro, went at this whole trade policy in a kind of indirect way.
And I'm hopeful, for example, with the tariffs, that at the end of the day, I hope it is agreed that both Europe and the United States should move, ideally, in my view, to a zero tariff situation, effectively creating a free trade zone between Europe and North America. And that would be that's what I hope occurs. And also more freedom of people to move between Europe and North America, if they wish. If they wish to work in Europe or wish to work in America, they should be allowed to do so, in my view. So that has certainly been my advice to the president.
Should have open borders and free trade within the white world.
With it, but I'm clearly only talking about the whites.
Right, the whites.
I'm only talking about Europeans.
Europeans, yeah.
People who share a common culture.
Right.
Only makes sense. So, okay, you could tell somebody must have told him to shut up with Navarro because he took down the "he didn't build shit" tweet. And here he's kind of trying to be more low key and make his case. But then Navarro made an appearance that seemed to have triggered him.
When it comes to tariffs and trade, we all understand in the White House, and the American people understand, that Elon's a car manufacturer. But he's not a car manufacturer. He's a car assembler in many cases. If you go to his Texas plant,
words.
a good part of the engines that he gets, which in the EV case is the batteries, come from Japan and come from China. The electronics come from Taiwan. The tires come. What we want, and the difference is in our thinking and Elon's on this, is that we want the tires made in Akron. We want the transmissions made in Indianapolis. We want the engines made in Flint and Saginaw, and we want the cars manufactured here. It's like this business model where BMW and Mercedes come in to Spartanburg, South Carolina, and have us assemble German engines and Austrian transmissions. That doesn't work for America. It's bad for our economics. It's bad for our national security. We want them to come here. And with Elon, it's fine. He's a car man. He's a car person. That's what he does. And he wants the cheap foreign parts, and we understand that. But we want him home. We want him home for our national security and economic security, and everything's good with Elon.
You're talking about all wrong. It's the wrong tone.
All right. So in MAGA world, that's just one notch above calling you a Covidian. Like he's,
Right.
He's really, hey, he's a car man. He wants the cheap parts. We're America first. He's a car manufacturer, so sure, he wants the open borders and the cheap labor. So that really triggered him. So Navarro is truly a moron. What he says here is demonstrably false. Tesla has the most American-made cars. Navarro is dumber than a sack of bricks. By any definition whatsoever, Tesla is the most vertically integrated auto manufacturer in America with the highest percentage of U.S. content. Navarro should ask the fake expert he invented, Ron Vara. So what is he talking about there? This is a good case of the worst people are arguing with each other. Yeah, he's right. Yeah, Navarro wrote a whole book where he made up a fake expert that he kept quoting. That's for real. He literally did that. This man, now that is the kind of thing that in a sane world would get you banned from any position of authority, responsibility. You shouldn't even really be able to go on TV and comment on anything, much less to have a very high profile role in the administration. In the first Trump administration, Kushner kind of cock-blocked him to keep him out because they all thought he was a clown. By all accounts, he is. According to some reporting also, Besant, we're not a fan of, but he's a more serious thinker, apparently did come up with a formula that was more sensible country by country. According to reports, Navarro was the architect of the figure out the deficit, divide by 2, and go after Penguin Island version that they ultimately go with. So Art Candy says it very well. You two clowns fighting is delicious. Yes, I second that. Now today, part of the reason this morning the market had a bounce was this reporting. Is a tariff reversal coming? Musk's direct appeal to Trump raises hopes. But those hopes seem to be getting dashed by the hour that the Trump faction, and there are other Trump donors who are trying to lean on him to get him to back off. As the day goes on and it becomes increasingly clear that it doesn't look like he's bluffing, it's been pulling back and pulling back and pulling back until now. It's a very small game, particularly relative to what we've seen with the stock market. I did mention the other day I was going to do a more extended piece. I want to wait to see what happens at midnight tonight because that could change. He could back down. I don't think he will. I think he's gone too far. But we will see what happens at midnight. But Elon is trying to use what pull and influence he has to stop these tariffs from going into effect.
Yeah, which is really not a surprise. I mean, his stance on the H-1B visa kind of forecast this in a way. It's of the same sort of economic school of thought that you would imagine a guy who is a proponent of those would be an opponent of these kinds of tariffs. By the way, I noticed Ron Vara is Navarro, same letters in his name. That was
yeah,
Ron Vara Navarro, same letters. He's very sneaky there. But yeah, I mean,
no, but really, like, why would you have a serious job in any administration after that?
Well, didn't he also go to jail for something? I forget what he went to jail for.
Well, this is why, actually, because he went to jail refusing to testify to the January 6th committee. That's why he has a job in the administration.
Oh, well, yeah, that makes sense. As a troll, right? Yeah, you got to own the libs. That the most important qualification on a resume for a job in the Trump White House or anywhere near the Trump White House is, would hiring you make liberals cry? And if yes, that gives you a huge leg up over the competition.
Well, really, it's where did you stand on Stop the Steal is probably the highest qualification you can get.
Yeah, that's probably most
really
important.
Yeah, if you stuck your neck out and said that election was stolen, you got a job with Trump.
Right.
I mean, really, that's what all these federal workers should do. They should come out and say the 2020 election was stolen.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that would be good advice. But yeah, I mean, look, there were bound to be these kinds of divisions. Look, Trump is really, if we're being honest, he's at odds with most of the Republican Party. I mean, we've seen a lot of senators and congresspeople speak out about this because they're concerned about the short-term impacts on their constituents since, you know, they don't have the same pull as the cult leader Donald Trump does, so they can be voted out if things get really bad. Besides that, just in terms of ideology, you know, most Republicans, most of them are still these kind of, you know, Chamber of Commerce, free trade types, you know. A lot of them have sort of adopted the Trump brand and the Trump signaling, because that's what sells now, and they are politicians first. If they weren't politicians first, they wouldn't be in Congress or the Senate. But so yeah, no, look, there's definitely rifts within the Trump team. There's rifts within the party as a whole. I just can't help thinking though, when I'm listening to Navarro talk about, yeah, we're gonna make the tires here, we're gonna make it. It was probably too late for that in like 1999. Like
Right.
it was probably too late then. Now you're seriously going to talk about getting this done in a short enough time frame where people aren't completely crushed during the transition? I mean, it just makes no sense on its face. And when you add to that, it is at odds with what other members of the team are saying. You know, Lutnick is saying, no, people are not going to do these jobs. Robots are going to do them. We just need to train people to build and maintain the robots.
Right.
It's completely incoherent.
Well,
it's completely incoherent.
Pretty much said that with Tucker. He said when he asked him if there's going to be enough labor to do this, oh, well, these will be smart factories with AI. So what does that mean?
No, this is just another version of the wired workers. It's another version of there will be a just transition. It's another version of, well, you're going to have to learn to code, or, well, you're going to have to go to school. It's, yeah, we're going to make this massive cataclysmic transition, and don't worry, we're going to take care of you through it. What has happened every other time people have promised that? Do you think Donald Trump is more trustworthy than any of these other people? I could see him. I mean, is he more of a snake than Bill Clinton? No. Is he less of one? Really? Tell yourself that. Look at Howard Lutnick and say, am I in good hands with this guy? I mean, come on. It's just, it is really bizarre. It is really bizarre that they're being given as much trust as they are. But I mean, that's evaporating very quickly. I mean, you're down to the lowest of the low. You're down to influencers like Benny Johnson going up there and saying, hey, if you lose everything, you really have lost nothing. What does it matter?
It's a fugazi.
It's a fugazi. I mean, yeah.
I must say, because, you know, we do track the conversations, obviously, we have to. Yeah, man, it is boiling down to the most Kool-Aid indoctrinated people. Like, you're not seeing the big, God damn it, what are you got Trump derangement syndrome? Who's paying you to say this stuff from the DNC? Like, you're not seeing as much of that reaction when people say, yo, this is really bad. You're seeing some of it, but it's more the people who are literally paid to say that shit, like Benny Johnson. Like, if you look at the rank and file, yeah, man, you got some of these people who just, you know, don't want to get off the cult train. But not as many, man, because it's such obvious common sense. Like, what do you think? Factories are going to start opening up by December? Yeah. What do you got? If you don't have anything now, assume they're right. Assume they're right. And there's every reason to think they're wrong. Cambodia just said, yeah, I mean, there's no way we're going to move factories there. You know, like, why would they?
Right.
And that's very obvious. We don't have the labor force that's capable of doing these jobs, that's trained to do these jobs. It's not 1945. It's a completely different population. You don't have the supply chains. You don't have the infrastructure. Like, this is not hard to see even for the average person. Meanwhile, even though, yeah, sure, you know, Tim Pool tweeted out, all of a sudden he's a class warrior, that Trump wiped out more millionaires and billionaires in the last week than the left has in 20 years. Okay, first of all, a 2-day market cycle did not wipe these people out, okay? These people have less money, but they got plenty of money. They can ride it out. In the end, those people, the people Trump really works for, they'll be fine. They'll be fine. People who have retirement savings in the market, which is 56% of the population, they're less likely to be fine than those people.
Yes. And, you know, the only other thing I would add to that is when you talk about, you know, the rich people being fine, they're losing numbers on a screen as of now, right? They're not losing cash money now, right? they're losing, as Matthew McConaughey says, Wolf of Wall Street. It's a fugazi. This is that. Right? That's what they're losing now. They're losing numbers on the laptop when they open it up and check the portfolio. They have 10 to 20 years to make that back. Now, might they? Might they not? Hey, who the hell knows what the future holds? But the point is that does not create an emergency for them right now. People who are approaching retirement age who need that money now, imminently, very shortly, they're the ones who are going to be screwed by this. And ultimately, this is all about enriching that former group. If they had said, hey, look, we're going to implement tariffs, we're going to tax the rich, and we know this is going to create major instability in the short term. So the revenues from the tariffs and the revenues from the tax increases on the rich, we're going to put those into a stimulus package for the middle class, for the working class, and for the poor to ride through the transition period. Then you could say, okay, now you could agree with that plan, you could not agree with that plan. That is a serious plan. This is the opposite of that. This is they're saying, no, we're going to cut taxes on the rich and we're going to gut the social safety net while we impose these tariffs. How is the middle class or the working class supposed to survive this? How?
That's what tells you what you need to know. You know, some people are saying, well, I thought the left hates the stock market. Yeah, sure. If you're talking about a kind of structural change that would actually transfer wealth to the working class and the middle class, like what Keaton just described, sure. They're cutting billions of dollars of taxes on the rich and cutting the jobs of federal workers who support social services. They just fired everybody at the program that supports people who can't afford heat in their houses. At the same time, what does that tell you about their priorities? What does that tell you about who they're thinking of? You know a thing by what it does. Look at what they're doing. They're lying to you about 250-year-olds collecting Social Security. Why would they do that? Why lie about something like that if you're not trying to find a pretext to take away people's benefits? So when they come to you and they say, the same exact people who are gutting the staff for providing heat support for poor people, many of whom would be elderly, would be disabled, and they tell you, oh, don't worry, this tariff plan is all for you. And if you step back for 2 seconds and you think about it, it doesn't make any sense, because you know it takes years to build factories, even if the theory were correct, and it's probably not. Even if it was that people are going to flood in to build factories here. Okay, so what are you going to do in the meantime if you're in a country where people are living paycheck to paycheck? What are those people supposed to do? Do people who would fire the entire staff that supports heating for poor people, do they look like people who care? People who think it's funny that they accidentally deported somebody to a hellish prison that violates every standard of cruel and unusual punishment we have, they think it's funny. Does that seem like people who are not psychopaths, who really just don't even care about that part? Did they conduct themselves like people who lose sleep at night about what this will do to you as a normal working person? Why would you think that?
Please clap.